and welcome back to Old School. Today we're going to have in class Dr. Mike Pierce. You go by Mike versus Michael, okay? He and his wife have both gone through multiple layers of education to come to the point where they have Empower Family Chiropractic. And today we are going to talk about the 5 elements. How do you put it?
5 essentials.
5 essentials of health. Yes. And really get into what, how every area, just like we talk about here at Old School, impacts your life. The emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical. So this is going to be some fun. We're going to get to talk, drill down a little bit. It would be great if we had hours to drill down more, but we're going to have some fun today. So I want to welcome you to class. So anyway, yes, on Old School, I want your story for sure. Mm-hmm. What I would like to start with is your story as it relates to your faith journey and to how we get to where you are now, like even through the schooling that you and your wife both went through. I found your story fascinating. So yeah, if you can tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I would say that growing up, there wasn't much faith in my family. Mm-hmm. I was baptized Catholic. My family did the typical like Easter and Christmas thing, right? But like there was no, I would say, faith structure growing up. And it wasn't until I got into college and I was dating a girl at the time who went to FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Oh, okay.
And then I got kind of like dipped into, and I was like, oh, this is cool. This is good. And then kind of leading into my faith story actually leads into how I became a chiropractor, because when I graduated undergrad, I grew up in a pretty unhealthy home physically. And then my dad, the day I graduated college, my dad had a heart attack and it put him into a medical coma for 4 months. Wow. And at the similar time, my mom had breast cancer. And both my parents, I was at a moment where I thought I was going to lose them. And, it's almost like you hear a lot of stories where when you're at your lowest is when God shines the brightest. Okay. And it was at this time when I felt like I was getting everything stripped away from me is when I would show up to the hospital and my dad would be, unconscious in the ICU, and I would sit there and I would just have nothing else to do but pray. And it was that journey. 4 months later, he did wake up and, we ended up trying to get him on a journey. But I would say that is where it started for me, was saying, man, God, if you can do one thing, help him open his eyes. And then when he opens his eyes, like help guide me so that I can lead him back to health. And when he woke up, not only did my faith journey start, but then that became my journey of seeking health. And my health journey started by trying to help my dad. And then that's ultimately kind of what led me to chiropractic, because it was a chiropractor, ironically, who saved my dad's life. Wow. He was on a journey, 2-year journey, ended up on 15 prescription pills and just sicker than ever. And it was a chiropractor who actually got him healthy and turned his life around. And that chiropractor was a biblically based chiropractor who explained health, I would say, through a faith lens that made sense. And that lens that he taught us is now what my wife and I in our office preaches today, is helping people regain faith in their innate wisdom that God put in their body. We read Jehovah Rapha in the office, like God the healer, because we believe that God is the healer, but we have to do our part to make sure that our bodies are in a divine alignment so that healing can flow.
It's so funny. I have so many people say things to me when I mention the phrase our part, having to do our part, and they're like, it's not works, but, and I go, no, I'm not talking about my salvation. If Jesus wanted to, he could fill my refrigerator. Mm-hmm. He could fill my gas tank. Mm-hmm. He could fill my bank account. Yeah. Or take me home and just not have to deal with any of it, but he doesn't. What he did was give me gifts and talents to go get a job, to go earn that money, to go do those things. And he doesn't even stop us when we make dumb choices on the food front, for that matter.
Yeah.
So that free will is still there. But yes, the blessings of God is listening to him and his wisdom for how to go about what we're doing. And I couldn't agree more with the phrase you said about the innate wisdom in our body, because that is what I talk about in my book. As people, sometimes I do believe that there are one-time healings that Jesus does. Those are miracles. Those are miracles when he was on the earth. And I believe those miracles still happen. I absolutely do. But I think for most of us, and especially in the mental and emotional and spiritual, it's a process on purpose.
Yeah.
It's a process so that we draw closer to him as we're walking through those. So when we have a wound happen, whether it's just some accident that we happen to us or some form of abuse, every single area is impacted. And now we have to begin the process. And our little brains are there. Our little hearts are there. Our little souls are there.
Yeah.
And I believe the Holy Spirit is there. And we are led through, like you said, that innate wisdom of the healing process. The troops come running if you cut your finger and coagulate the blood and clot it so you don't bleed out.
Right.
You know, same with our everything else. So it's so beautifully intertwined. And you're right, it has to be in alignment. No pun intended to the chiropractic.
Right.
And I think a lot of times the world's opinion of what a chiropractor does.
Yeah.
And I'm old, so back when you guys first came out, which you weren't born yet, but anyway,
Sure. Yeah.
everybody just thinks they just crack you.
Yeah.
You know, you just walk in their office and they just crack you. And mind you, there were some people who were doing just that. You know, and it's like, wait a minute, you know, you didn't check on anything else. I forget who wrote the book, How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor. Is that Sears, maybe?
I think so. I could be wrong,
But he talks about when your mom takes a baby to the doctor,
yeah.
they ask the mom all these questions and then do something. So those are questions. I mean, and admittedly, I'm not going to try and diagnose cancer at home, but I mean, you're going to be able to do a lot of that because you're the one assessing what's going on.
Yeah.
So I have to believe then, by your comments, that you don't just crack people.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So I come in to what it's called
Empower Family
Max-
Chiropractic.
Oh, okay. But Max Living Health
Correct.
Center, is that?
That's correct.
They're the same.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I come in. What do we do?
So what's amazing is you come in, and obviously there's a past there, right? So I believe that where we are right now, whether it be, again, going back to what you're saying, the physical, mental, spiritual health, wherever we are, we are in an accumulation of everything we've been through. And what people don't realize is that your health right now is basically an accumulation of all of your choices, good or bad. Everything you've eaten, everything, all the falls, all the trips, all the things, whether it be a physical trauma, a spiritual trauma, an emotional trauma, a chemical trauma, all of that adds up. And your nervous system is what composes all of that and then takes that in. And then whether it releases it or whether it does something to the body, here we are, right? So when someone walks in the clinic, my job is to sit down, get a background of saying, well, what does that history look like? What have you been through? And help me figure out the puzzle pieces of where, like, why are you where you are?
Okay.
And then if we believe, number one, that the way the body heals and functions is through the brain communicating through the nervous system, then what chiropractic, again, the misconception is that it's not about cracking bones, it's about influencing the nerve system.
Right.
So if the nervous system is what's flowing from the brain in through your spinal cord, out through every single nerve, communicating life to the body, then what we do is we look at the spine and say, where is the spine not in a divine alignment? And how do we help that spine get back into an alignment that's releasing the interference from your brain communicating to your body? Now, for example, if you think about the spine should have a normal alignment it should be in. And if the spine's in that normal alignment, therefore everything should flow healthy, right? So when you come in, the two things that we evaluate very thoroughly is the nervous system and then the alignment of the spine. So when you come in, we go through what's going on, and then we do a scan of the nerve system to figure out, is the nervous system in balance? Because a dysregulated nervous system is going to create an imbalance in functionality to the health. Then we look and say, okay, if it's out of balance, well then how can I then go back and take x-rays to figure out the cause of that? Why is the nervous system out of balance? And if you look at anatomy, the nervous system is sitting inside your spinal cord,
Inside the spine.
right? So if the spine is out of an alignment, you're going to see an exact reaction going straight into, okay, the spine's out, nerves are affected, cause and effect.
Right.
So once we figure that out, now we sit down with the patient and say, hey, we have an understanding of why is this happening, basically helping you get down, like, what's the root cause of the headache? What's the root cause of the blood pressure? What's the root cause of whatever it may be?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've never been even when I was younger and not necessarily introduced to naturopaths or anything, I never liked taking drugs. They always made me feel bad. Mm-hmm. So isn't it funny how wonderful our body is? It's going, this is junk. This shouldn't be in your body. And I always thought, okay, I have a headache, but wouldn't it be better? I'm just a logic person.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better if I just understood why I have the headache and do something about that? Like if I'm in bright light or been staring at a screen too long, go take a walk or do something else, as opposed to just automatically reaching for some kind of drug, which, like with your father, the reason he was probably on 15 different ones is because one gave him 3 other symptoms. Yeah. So now he needed to take 3 other drugs and then on and on and on. Yeah. I love those commercials, pharma commercials on TV that go, this is going to help you lose weight. And they show active people running around, but it gives you boils, diarrhea, and hair loss. So now you look fun. Now I want to date you.
And they always say them so fast, right? Like, just speed through that part really quick.
I'm like, wait, none of that sounds very good to me.
I'll take the headache. Yeah.
Or the few extra pounds or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, okay, so that's all on the physical realm, which is great. Yeah. So you're saying you have I forget the phrase you used about the original chiropractor with your dad. He was a biblical.
So there's a biblical lens to understanding health and chiropractic.
Okay.
And how they kind of coincide.
Okay. So explain that to me.
So you mentioned, the birth of chiropractic. So 1895 is when chiropractic first started. Okay. And there's a man named D.D. Palmer. And this guy was back in the day, he was a magnetic healer back then. And what he found, and if you go back and read his writings, and this is where what made me get into chiropractic is not so much of what keeps me in chiropractic, because once I learned the philosophy of what it's really about, it's very much not a mechanistic crack your back profession.
Sure.
It has gotten that way because I feel like chiropractors today have gotten pretty lazy, and they've gotten complacent, right? And they're not doing and searching to figure out, like, hey, what built this profession? And if you go back in D.D. Palmer's writings, the quote that I think I love the most is he said that the purpose of a chiropractic adjustment is to reconnect man the spiritual to man the physical. And so D.D. Palmer was a believer. And if you read his writings, he talks all about God. He talks all about the creation of the body. He talks all about that we were built in God's image. He talks all about, it's all through his writings. And he goes, and this goes back to what I preach to a lot of patients, is that if you look at the way we were created, a lot of times we don't need to add more to our bodies to make us better. We need to remove more, right? Like, have you heard of the story of Michelangelo and Statue of David?
Yes.
So he talks about how did you make David? He's like, well, I just took this stone and David was already there. I just removed everything that wasn't David. Right. And our lifestyle, we are here, and this beautiful creation of God that we are, all the things that we see, it's more about, hey, what do we need to get rid of that's inhibiting us from us being us?
Right.
You know what I mean?
What needs to be chipped away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so much, like when somebody goes in because their knee is hurting them and they find out they have liver cancer or something like that, so much of it is not like a visible to the outside person. And I think we've gotten to a place in society where we think certain symptoms, I guess would be the way to call them, are funny or just something we need to tolerate because we're getting older. And I reject that out of hand.
Good. Good. Amen.
I reject that out of hand.
Amen.
My brothers are within a year of me, and one of them the other day when he was passing through town and he stays with me said something about it sucks getting old, doesn't it? Because something, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a joint thing or something. And I'm like, no, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
Something is going on. I got some inflammation. I got
Yeah.
something going on that's taking place. And he, they laugh at me, but I would rather do a little bit more of a drill down. And what you were saying about how chiropractors have gotten to the place where all they're going to do, they might go so far, is to find what part of the spine is misaligned. Okay, I'm going to adjust you. Now you're going to be fine.
Right.
What you're proposing, as I get it, is no, let's follow that rabbit hole. Let's see why it got that way in the first place, or
Right.
what may be going on inside you, or emotionally, or whatever it might be that created this in the first place. Yes?
So think about that in chiropractic, when something's misaligned or when the spine is out of position, the term we use is subluxation.
Right.
Okay. Now, the term to go in what you're saying is you have to help people identify the recreation of subluxation, meaning that if there's a certain lifestyle pattern that we've developed that have gotten us here, I don't care if you come see me every day.
Right.
If I adjust you and if I correct it, but you go right back into the poor posture, back into the toxic food, back into the toxic thinking, your body's going to go right back to where it was. So you have to figure out, well, what is that pattern that we've developed that is recreating that misaligned life, we'll call it, right?
Right.
Like so we have to identify those patterns to help people knock those out.
And doesn't that make sense outside of even chiropractic?
Yes.
Like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, every bit of it. We want to go cry out to God and ask him to get us out of a pickle. And he may help us, make it not hurt so bad as we walk through it. And then we go right back. And I think everything, I can't even think of the quote. I saw a meme on it the other day, but it was kind of leads to what you were saying when we first started, is that we're the sum of those things. And that's the same with like a habit, or why we stay addicted to something is because of the consistency.
Yeah.
And the same consistency of addiction is what is required to get you out of it. You got to stay consistent. Like you said, otherwise all you're getting to do as a chiropractor is make some money
Right.
for everybody to keep coming back every day.
Right.
And I think that's a total awesome value add, because again, doctors, air conditioning technicians, all these people who come and take care of an individual situation, if they don't have the follow through to why it happened, people get frustrated.
Yeah.
They get a little annoyed and think, well,
Yeah.
what earthly good are you, Like when you go to your mechanic and they fix one thing and then a week later something else goes wrong.
Yes. So growing up, me being in the millennial generation, right, there's always this phrase of like, oh, like we don't take responsibility. And I would agree. And I think that in general with our health, we need to take more responsibility for where we are, because the problem is if you go to the opposite spectrum and you take the victim mentality, right? If you say, well, it's just my genes. Oh, it's just this. Oh, it's just that. Well, then if it's no longer in your control, then you can't change it. But what I tell people is that if you look at, 90 to 95% of the lifestyle diseases we have today are in your control to change. And if you take responsibility for what those things are and say, listen, I got myself here, the beauty is that you can get yourself out of those things, And what I love about what you said earlier about, when if God wanted to, he could change things in an instant, right? And I think when we pray, one of the things that I tell my patients a lot is that our God can answer in outcomes, but most times when you're praying for patience, he's giving you opportunities to practice patience, right? If you're praying for an outcome, God will almost always give you the opportunity to exercise that thing and get better at that thing. But when we don't see that thing happen, a lot of times what can happen is that we think God's not listening. So yeah, I believe that sometimes when we make prayers, right, and we think that, oh, God's not listening to me because he's not giving me the outcome that I prayed for. Well, maybe God put that person in front of you that you need to reach out to that's going to help you. Or maybe he put the opportunities for you to practice those habits to get you back where you should be.
That's exactly how I feel about, and it was so funny when in the beginning trying to verbalize and what they call like the elevator pitch of why my book that describes abuse, why is it any different, and all these people who tell stories of abuse and then have a one-time I met Jesus, and now they say they're okay, but have they really done the work? And I think it is a process. I think just like forgiveness, I mean, it's so easy to say that I'm going to forgive somebody because I don't want to carry that bitterness.
Yeah.
But after a 30-year marriage ends with infidelity, you know, that forgiveness is going to have to get deployed more than just on that one day. You know what I mean? It's just going to have to. There are things that are going to trigger up. Now, do you want to sit in that and be a victim and like you said, or no, but you got to work that muscle. We work those muscles. And I agree. I think that the interconnectivity of how, you know, when we let something emotional hang on to us, it eats our body alive. I think probably, do you know who, oh, I forgot his last name. He's the toxin guy.
Toxin.
He does cellular level healing. Cole, Dr. Cole.
I don't know.
Anyway, he's very interesting. He has this like academy and what have you. Well, he had a free masterclass for 5 days. It was like 2 hours in the evening, and I decided to listen to it. And he talks about the cellular level of things, and so that the fact that he was going to cover like the top 5 toxins just for the sake of this. He wasn't going to give away the farm because his academy is $8,000.
Sure, yeah.
But I feel like I had gotten myself to such a place being almost like ketovore, and you know, I knew what I was comfortable with, and I'd go to a naturopath and I wasn't on any medications, but I just felt like I had kind of an incident where they thought I had uterine cancer and there was excess estrogen going on. And people around me were like, "You're so healthy. I can't believe you did anything to make this happen." And I said, "I disagree with that. I think every bit of what happens to us is, like you said, a sum. Now, is our water got stuff in it, in our air?
Yeah.
Sure. There's some other stuff we can't control. But the controllables, I've gotten rid of probably 80% of that toxic load.
Good.
And it is ridiculous. I don't know that I lost a whole ton of weight, and I probably could, of course, lose some more. But the internal inflammation, when that gets shut off, it is like there's no caffeine, there's no Red Bull, there's no Monster that's going to benefit that. So taking those poor little cells that are going to develop take care of the nutrients as you're bringing them in. And I read The Liver Cure by this is terrible. I'm acting really old right now to not remember their names. But anyway, he talked about how what we eat and the nutrients we have can turn off and on genetic switches.
Yeah, Dr. Bruce Lipton. So Dr. Bruce Lipton...
Is that? I don't think that was his last... But in any case,
It
was the book, The Liver Cure. But he talks about via the liver...
Yes.
That we can actually, by doing even some things that we think we're doing good, we're turning off a gene that needs to function in a certain way. So going back to your point about people who want to sit back and say, it's just my genes.
Yeah.
Not, would that be your summation of how our body treats things?
Yeah, so Dr. Bruce Lipton is a epigeneticist, and there's this concept of epigenetics to this point that what they found was that 95% of all health diseases today are lifestyle induced, but 5% are actual genetic things, right? But what, to this point is that the way that you think, the way that you eat, the way that you move or don't move, the way that your body is inflamed or not, all of these factors, your toxicity levels, to your point exactly, can turn on genes or turn off genes. So what they say is that your genes is what loads the gun, but your lifestyle is what pulls the trigger.
Awesome.
Okay?
Yeah.
So when you look at that you're given a specific genetic map. However, how I live will activate certain things or turn them off. So for example, in my family, down the line, most of my family has, we'll say, heart disease, okay? Well, I can then go into this lifestyle saying, listen, doesn't matter what I do, everyone has heart disease, I'm doomed to have it, so it doesn't matter if I eat the donuts and the pizza, it doesn't matter. Or I can say, hey, I can choose to not eat what they ate, I can choose to not think how they thought, I can choose to move more than they moved, I can choose to do different things, and I'm going to make sure that I don't end up like that because I don't have to.
Right. Because you don't have to load the gun with that caliber.
Yes, exactly.
If you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the same with generational sin.
Yo.
I struggled for a long time. I wanted to say that I thought using that term was a cop out. Okay. It's a real thing.
Sure.
It can be very much so, but I am proof, my brothers and I, that you don't have to just sit and accept it.
Yeah.
You know, that you don't get to just sit there and say, well, my dad was like that, so this is just the inevitability of it all.
Yeah.
And it's so the same with our diet and they say that we all have genetically potential cancer in our body that is just waiting to be triggered.
Totally.
So now it comes down to, like you said, whatever we're going to choose to do is going to make that be what we're going to reside in. And then it's so funny how all of us, whether it's the generational sin in our spiritual life or our bodies and how the chronic disease manifests, it's somebody else's fault.
It's so much easier to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, my grandparents, dang it, they liked carbs.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with all the carbs you put in your mouth.
Yes, as you chomp
That's
on it.
right. That's right.
Okay, so clearly you're going to talk to people about, adjustments, about dealing with their subluxations and all of that. So where do you go in regard to like the nutrition and the toxic loads of their body?
So in our office, so in Max Living, so if people are watching this around the country, for example, Max Living is an umbrella of chiropractors across the country that is, it's a faith-centered company.
Oh,
so
okay.
if you go into any Max Living office around the country, you're going to go into a biblically sound chiropractor that focuses on what we would call the 5 health essentials. Okay. So one of those 5 essentials would be empowering people with a strong mindset in prayer, in gratitude, in an understanding of, again, that innate wisdom that governs your body. We believe that you have to, number one, understand and believe that. Because I can adjust you every single day. But again, if you're going home with a defeated mindset, if your mind is not right, then we always say you have to adjust the mind before the spine. Right?
No,
So
funny.
the mindset. Number 2 is that we have to put quality nutrition and feed the body. So the nutrition aspect, to simplify it really fast, like we frame it that you need to put more God-made food in your body and less man-made food in your body. Right? And then we elaborate from there.
I heard somebody say, I apologize for interrupting, but I heard somebody say, if what you're eating has its own marketing kit or what have you, media kit, then you shouldn't be eating it.
Right. It can be, right. We overcomplicate nutrition. And again, in our like nutrition classes, we basically break this down, but it's so much more overcomplicated.
Right.
Just at a bare minimum, eat more God food, eat less man food. Yes. The next one would be movement, that we were created and designed to move. And we are so sedentary. I just saw this stat the other day that said the average prisoner today gets more physical activity than the average child.
I don't doubt that.
Right.
It makes me cry at Christmas because back in the day when I was a kid, you got bikes and footballs and baseball bats and stuff. Yeah. And on Christmas Day, even in Michigan, snow, we were out there with our toboggans or whatever it was. We were moving.
Yes.
Nowadays, and especially in Arizona, the weather's beautiful. To drive around on Christmas Day and not see anybody outside having any fun.
Right.
They're sitting like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think so encouraging people to move. And I think that there's multiple ways that can look, whether that's in a gym working out, whether that's out on hikes, whether that's out walking. I mean, we need to move more. So I think we don't try to box it in. I think that we can get specific with people based off health goals, but I think at a bare minimum for most people, you just got to move more.
Right.
And then the 4th one would be toxicity. So then we look at, this is one of the most, I would say, toxic cultures that we've ever seen. And you kind of made a point to it, but there's toxins in our water, there's toxins in our air, there's toxins in our cleaning supplies, in our healthcare products. There's thousands and thousands of toxins in our food currently. So the problem is that there's so much an accumulation of toxicity coming in that we host seminars in our office helping people identify where are the majority of these toxins coming from, and then, like you said, control the controllables. What can you do? What can we do to eliminate the toxicity to the best of our ability? And I always say, like, listen, we control what we control, and then I give the rest to God.
Right.
You know?
Because it can get ridiculously expensive, but I
Sure.
get the adage that, if you could pay for it later if you don't address it. But there are ways to address, like the top 5 toxins that Dr. Cole talked about, just to kind of throw a little tidbit out there.
Yeah.
He was like, bad oils, number 1. And I didn't understand how bad oils can impact a cell worse than alcohol or sugar.
Yeah.
Because once they're damaged, then they don't know how to deal with glucose,
Yeah.
or they don't know how to deal with insulin or any good nutrient coming in. So I just did not understand how severely bad oils were.
Yeah.
The seed oils, the bad oils.
Yeah.
And alcohol was in his top 5, but he wasn't even like, he was saying anxiety and bad oils were probably the top 2. Then of course sugar, and then cleaning and beauty products.
Yes.
I'm like, it is ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, why does someone, like when you sit down and start to read stuff, it's the same with my daughter loves Starbucks. It drives me crazy. And she's been diagnosed diabetic. And that their pumpkin spice latte puts caramel color in. Coffee by nature is caramel colored.
Yep. Exactly.
Why is that necessary?
Yeah.
And to see that how in other countries, like, I don't think there are very many countries worse than us.
No.
And if they're worse than us, it's not because they have more, like food dyes and toxins put in their food. It's because their food supply is tainted.
Correct.
More so. So we are just the worst.
Yeah. They were talking the other day about like Fruit Loops, for example.
Yes.
Right?
The
Did you
color
hear that?
different. I saw that they were in front of Congress or at a conference or something, and Bobby Kennedy was there, and that girl, this is terrible, I forget her name, but she goes by Food Babe
Food Babe. Yep. Yeah. And she's been making this big push because, for example, all of the different food dyes that they have in our Fruit Loops, these are all linked to neurodevelopmental disorders, ADHD, all these things. And then you look at other countries and they're using like watermelon extract and turmeric and So it's like, why aren't we doing that?
Yeah. I mean, why?
Yeah.
Why is that bad? Why did that even start? Like, who sat down one day and said, I just need to inject this toxin that probably is used in my kids' paint at in elementary school into our food? I mean, I get it, marketing, that
Sure.
maybe it's more bright and whatever, but still.
So what happened was in the 70s, do you remember back when there was actually commercials and added that said that smoking for pregnant women was healthy and fine?
Absolutely.
Remember, so smoking was actually, there was tobacco commercials that promoted it. It was good.
Yeah.
Okay. So what they did was in the 70s, they took the scientists from the tobacco companies, the FDA did, so big pharma and food. They took all of these scientists and said, hey, all of the things that you did to make tobacco so addictive, we need you to do that for food. And because if you watch around the 70s, this is when there was a shift. And if you go back and look at numbers.
TV dinners came out,
all
kinds of processed food.
And what they did was they found these scientists who basically said, what can you put in these foods to make them more palatable, more safe, more addictive, to where it's going to trigger the brain in a certain way. And this is when you see all of these processed foods come out, but all of these ingredients and all these artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners and all these things started coming out. And you're like, because it's cheaper to make, there's more money for them. And again, not to go down a rabbit hole, but I feel like, unfortunately, that if you follow the money, you're going to see that they're going to go really, really sick people, then play right back into them big pharma needing the
drugs,
the pills, and it's a vicious cycle now.
And then you need the hospital, and you need all kinds of doctors.
And now you're stuck in the system. We call this the medical merry-go-round.
Yeah, I feel that way. I mean, I work in accounting, and I feel that way about the government entities that handle our taxes and stuff. They don't make it easy for you to not be, eternally in debt to them, or burdened, overburdened. And I think that leads to a whole nother set of anxieties or toxins is anxiety.
Yeah.
What it does to your body and how it can cripple you. Yeah, I'm so excited about Bobby Kennedy too. And I was like, I want to send my resume in, and even if it means I have to move back to DC or something, to have a front row seat to watching some of this, if it really, It's all great right now.
Sure.
We're making appointments, but I would just like to see once we start having it come to fruition,
Oh, yeah.
it's going to be quite a shockwave.
Yes.
Because I don't know that the general public, as great as this all sounds, really wants to not be addicted to their stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
They love it.
Yeah.
My daughter openly admits that she has issues with sugar, but it doesn't, in and of itself, she's not going to stop.
Yeah.
So interesting. Well, I think that's awesome. That sounds like a great, pentafecta or whatever.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
The pentathlon
There you
of
go. Yes.
So that sounds like you wrap it up kind of in a bow, where you're covering the emotional, mental, and spiritual and physical aspects, not just of our body, but of the externals and the control we have over them. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
You guys have to be doing magnificently well.
I think that there's a need for this, obviously, but we need more of us doing this. I think we need more people speaking out, educating, equipping people, and then giving them the tools and the empowerment to take ownership of their health again. And I do think that we're finally hoping, with where we are right now with Bobby and everybody in order, the whole Make America Healthy Again crew, right?
Yeah.
They're putting a good team together, and I really think that the trajectory is going. But I would say that from a spiritual space, we have a hard time letting go of labels. And we have a hard time letting go because it almost has become an identity of us.
Right.
And I think for people, what I would say is if somebody truly wants to be healthy and set free, we have to remove the labels that have been put on us. Because we almost feel like there might be people listening right now who we have this identity that, well, if I don't have my diabetic identity, then I don't know what I am.
Right.
Like I need this.
Right.
Versus saying no. We tell our patients the only identity that you should ever hold on to forever is that you are a child of God.
Yes.
And outside of that, we need to let go. And I think the hardest thing for, I would say, people, but Christians, period, is obedience to God's call.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling a call to saying, I need to make a shift in my health, obedience to letting go of the sugar, obedience to letting go of the addictive thing, whatever that thing is in your life that's taking root, the obedience to say, I love God more than I love this.
What's fascinating is like I had said when we first started, I was in the keto space, and then I kind of pressed in to ketovore because I do love meat.
Yeah.
And old women and processed food and flour and sugar just don't go well. I don't think most people do,
Sure.
to be perfectly honest. But the older you get, the worse it is hormonally and all that good stuff. And I went on a cruise in the spring with a singles group I'm involved with. And anyway, I tried to maintain, because I like what I do for my health. It's not something I feel like I need a vacation from or that I'm being deprived. But it was so funny when we would all sit down to the main dinner hall or whatever, and people would be just like, oh, come on, you're on vacation, cut free, and I have drinks, I have cocktails. I don't all the time because I do understand that it is a poison. It is a toxin, and I, accommodate accordingly. But it was so funny because I was staying true to the meat and to more whole food, if you will. But I didn't have control over how they were cooking it. The bad oils were, I guarantee you, were flying back there because, they're just not, they're going to go the cheap route. But it is interesting how believers too, but just generally in society, when somebody starts to make success in changing how they're doing things, it's more people, it feels like sometimes want to see you not make it. Because they're convicted about their own life choices. And I don't ever say what I'm doing. Well, first of all, I don't say it. People start taking a look at what I'm doing and they ask. So if you're going to ask and then I'm going to give you an answer, don't get all pissy with me because you don't like it, because you're unwilling to do that, And so it is the obedience. It is the obedience to finally making the right changes, because I just didn't want the outcomes I was getting for my health.
Sure.
So clearly, for me, I had gotten to a point where I had lost the weight I wanted to lose. I have good energy for somebody my age. But it was okay, this is interesting, this cellular healing.
Yeah.
And man, the toxins are endless.
Yes.
They're endless.
I think for the people who don't want to congratulate you and don't want to back you up, it's because we don't like feeling convicted,
No, no,
right?
not even a little
And
bit.
I think the way that I've always grown up is what led me to the church I'm in now is that I show up on Sunday not just for the pastor to feed me. I realize it's my job to go through the week and to study and get in the Word, but we all need to be held accountable.
Yeah.
We all need to make sure that we're spending time asking for forgiveness and repenting from our ways and whatnot. But at the same time, like I need to feel convicted and I need to be called out. We all do. And if we don't have somebody holding us accountable in our areas of life, this is how the devil slowly starts to twist. In fact, one of my favorite quotes that I say in the office a lot is that the devil loves to take righteousness and make it look weird and make weird look righteous, right? And by weird, I mean he takes our sin and he makes sin look good in front of all of us. And then he makes, whenever we try to do good things, it becomes weird to people.
Right.
Does that make
So,
sense?
yes, absolutely. Our one of our associate pastors, I go to CCV, and one of our associate pastors, and one of his messages, especially after COVID, he said, isolation and opportunity, they're just a breeding ground.
Yeah.
If you're isolated at home, you can start not having accountability and, oh, it won't hurt just this one time. And the next thing you know, it's a pattern that you're not, sticking with what the healthy choices that you started to head towards in whatever realm, emotionally. And they related a lot to like people getting addicted to porn or whatever it might be. But, like the wine moms who say they're going to go home and have one glass and it turns into a whole bottle because you're by yourself and nobody's, there to hold the accountability.
Sure.
I think accountability partners are so important.
Yeah.
And I like mentors too. Although I've joked now that for me to find a mentor, somebody older than me, they'd be a mummy. I mean, like I don't have a bunch of people around me that are older. In fact, my whole world tends to be a bunch of people who are younger, which is even more mentoring, is even more encouraging for me.
Yeah.
Well, this has been wonderful. And one thing I do with my podcast before I get to end, I don't know if you watched the episode with Adrian all the way through, but I ask a nugget. I ask, what is there one thing that you wish you knew sooner or that somebody had told you sooner?
Do I have to have one?
No, you can have more than one if you want.
Yeah. The reason I say that is on a spiritual space, because I didn't grow up with health, I wish somebody would have taught me about salvation and repentance sooner.
Okay.
And I think that as knowing that at the end of our Christian life, our salvation is the most important thing that we have. I wish that growing up and not knowing how much I grew up in sin and didn't understand that it was not a terrible thing, I wish that I would have been raised in a way to understand how to turn from those sinful ways sooner. And I wish, I say that because I think it could have changed a lot of my, what I went through in my perspective of life growing up. And then another thing is I wish that I would have understood this chiropractic principle sooner, because I watched what it did once we applied it with my dad. And I think back to like, if this would have been applied to me as a kid and I would have been living this 5 essential lifestyle as a child, I could have avoided so much sickness and unhealthiness my whole life.
Right.
And I pray that people hear this message and they, regardless of where they are in their life, take those two things and know that at the end of our life, no matter how healthy we are, if we don't know Jesus, we're not going to heaven. And then no matter how much we love Jesus, if our bodies are falling apart, we can't serve Jesus. So I think the two things, the two spectrums that they come together is that you have to love the Lord and serve the Lord and be obedient, but you have to take care of your temple at the same time so that you can be of service when you're called.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be something with the whole Make America Healthy Again if we got rid of that food pyramid?
Oh, come on.
And get rid of all of that. And
Yeah.
if people, as they were coming up through elementary school or maybe middle school around then, sooner would be great for their parents. But I
Yeah.
mean, the conversation was about the 5 elements that you're talking about,
Yep.
as opposed to, I mean, and I get it. There's a lot of people in the education system that don't want to bring the Bible in or spirituality, but fine. But still, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, being able to talk about how those best health outcomes can happen is not the food pyramid.
Yes. Amen. Agreed.
Well, it's been a pleasure. You're
you.
fun. I knew that Adrian and Justin both had said, you guys need to have him on the podcast. So I said, all right, let's do this.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate
it's
it.
been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming to class today. We've had such a good time. If you are in the Arizona area, all of the connection information for Dr. Mike will be in there, or you can reach out to me at the show or on my website. We'd like it if you go over, like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that good stuff. And if you want to leave any comments or however you want to reach out and engage, we love every bit of that. So thank you for coming to class today, and class dismissed. This episode of Old School with Michele Frebel is brought to you by Brush with Greatness, a Hawaiian artist studio.